Hey guys, welcome to the RareErth Podcast. My name is Manoj, engineer by qualification, a banker by profession, and a podcaster by passion. My goal is to really bring people who have actually charted the unconventional path, explore their learnings, and share that with you. I'm super excited to have you join me on this show. And now, let's get the show started. Welcome to the season 2 of episode number 1283 of the RareErth Podcast. Just kidding, guys. Welcome to season 2, and this is our first ever episode. We completed 12 in our past season, so super excited to have this launch right now. My guest today is Dr. Siddharth Warrier. He's a neurologist, and he has been in this line of work for almost 10 years. That is almost a decade. And his specialty, apart from his core job, which is being a doctor, is he's a very impressive YouTuber. In his YouTube channel, which has got a tagline, Neuroscience is everything, he really explores a wide-ranging topic speaking about science, mental health, human behavior, and neuroscience of everything. In fact, he's got a very interesting lineup of guests who have featured in his show, and it's actually pretty impressive. You must go check it out. And he also does a lot of Instagram live. He is very active on Twitter. He's a poet. So this is the man with varied interest, and you will really discover more in this episode. So in this conversation, we actually go quite deep. It's actually an information-dense episode, and I really wanted to split it into two because it had so much content. But I'm going to keep it as a single episode. I'm sure you will have a blast just like the way I had. Without taking much time, let's straight dive into this conversation with this amazing man, Dr. Siddharth Warrior. So welcome, Sid. Welcome to the RareErth Podcast. You've been somebody who I stumbled upon through Prakar's content. I think that was one of the trifecta YouTube video that you guys were involved in, and that's when I actually got a little exposure to you, and really liked the way you explain things and how you put across your ideas. So I started doing a little bit of binge watching of your stuff. And then I got a little confused. Are you the poet, or are you the neurologist, or the content creator?
My channel is designed to confuse people like that.
Yeah, so it's a really good brain exercise.
Yeah. So the title of my channel was that neuroscience is everything,
Right.
and I'm trying to live up to that tagline.
Not bad. You're doing a tremendously good job there. So, so welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So in fact, I was speaking to one of my friend much before the recording, and this was like 2-3 days back. And I said, hey, you know what? I'm getting a neurologist to come into my show. And then she was very excited. She said, hey, that's amazing. Mera number, my date of birth is like 22 and my husband's is 11. So please check the compatibility. I said, no, yaar, numerologist nahi, neurologist.
Yeah, it's an often confused subject between
Right, right.
numerology and neurology.
So I wonder, do you have any expertise in that field too?
In numerology, absolutely not, I'm afraid.
So when we say a neurologist, what exactly does a neurologist do?
So I'm a doctor, essentially. I'm somebody
Right.
who's done MBBS and then MD and then DM medicine in neurology. So that's super specialization. And
Hmm.
my core area is the brain. So neurology is all about the brain, the spinal cord, the nerves, the muscles. So that part of the human body comes under my specialty. So anytime anybody has any problem in this particular aspect of the human body, they come to me.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And typically, a neurologist, what's your typical day look like? So when I think now, though, of course, we have the COVID going on, things have become remote. But otherwise, what does a typical day look like for you?
So my days have actually not changed much because of COVID, because usually doctors have pretty much the same routine. The only thing is that apart from getting out of the house, visiting hospitals, seeing patients who are admitted, seeing OPDs, and for surgeons attending operation theaters, all of this is still going on for most doctors. The only thing that is extra is that we've also added online consultation, which was not
Mm-hmm.
the case so much before. But now that has
Right.
become a significant part of the day. So every day I spend a couple of hours doing online consultation in the mornings. And then I leave the
Mm.
house. I have a usual round of hospitals where people are admitted. So I have to go and check up on them. And then I have my OPD. And some days I get home by 5, some days I get home by 9, depending on whether I have evening OPD or not. And
Okay.
the days I do get home early, I spent a little bit of time relaxing, and then I started on my second job, which has started since the last one, which is online content creation.
Yeah, Siddharth, I think you have put in a tremendous amount of content in the last 1 year. If I look at the YouTube content that you have produced, the different kinds of people that you have interviewed, was it a sheer outcome of boredom, or you had so much time, or this was something you were passionate about, or you discovered your passion during this COVID times? What's the story?
So the story was I was always interested in neuroscience. Even before I had got into neurology, I always knew that I'm interested in the brain. I wanted to learn all about it. And the reason was I wanted to understand human behavior through neuroscience, understand psychology through neuroscience. So that was always there. And I have been reading up and I've been collecting all this information for the last 3 years with the hope of one day writing a book,
Ah,
which is how I think a lot of ideas start. And
hmm.
then you realize that, hey, it's not 1960s anymore. And there are many other ways of getting your information out there. And so when I discovered YouTube content creation, when I discovered how to make videos, it was a whole new world.
Hmm.
And I really got into it.
Yeah, I think when I look at the way you are actually even having these YouTube lives and different forums or different platforms that you're engaging in, you seem technically also very equipped. Like you seem to understand the camera, light, mic. You seem to be using all that to your advantage, which I'm really surprised somebody from a background like yours, being a
Yeah.
doctor, and the creative aspect of you, which has flourished so much. I do not I cannot generalize it, but I generally do not see doctors being on the creative side so much. So how are you able to get that creative juices going for
Well,
you?
you'd be amazed at actually how many doctors are creative. Because I know from my time in MBBS and MD, there are a lot of doctors who excel in a lot of creative fields in music, in arts, and poetry.
Hmm.
The thing is
Hmm. Hmm.
that
Hmm.
it's very easy to get lost in the world of medicine and in the
Hmm.
hospitals and in patient management, and you would be forgiven for putting everything else on the back burner,
Hmm.
thinking that, hey, this is not as important as my other work, which is what a lot of doctors do actually. And I'm
Hmm.
trying to change that narrative. I'm trying to speak to MBBS students, tell them that it doesn't have to be this way, because there's
Hmm.
no reason why engineering students are any more or less talented than medical. It's just that your choice in your career should not affect your entire personality like that.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that being said, I've always been interested in arts. I used to sing. I used to write poetry right from childhood. I play the guitar. I'm basically a curious person, so I try my hand at whatever interests me at that time, and I usually try and uh, not let things go once I pick it up. So I try to incorporate that in whatever next thing I do. So it just keeps
Hmm.
getting added up. And I love technology. Even in my free time, when I switch on YouTube, I'm usually watching some tech channel.
Tech stuff.
Yeah,
Okay.
just even if I never buy it, it's just fun to watch. So
That's really interesting. Yeah, but I think you have put it to use in a very good way. Many people are unable to still figure out how to bring the content out there, and even if they're not doing it in a way which is presentable. So you're doing really good. So
yeah,
awesome.
also it's now I feel like it is not so much an option anymore, knowing
Hmm. Hmm.
technology, because in today's world, being literate means being technically capable, because this is the language that we use to communicate with each other. We can no longer
Right.
say that, hey, I don't know how to switch on a Zoom call, or I don't know how to send a mail, because this is how
Right.
human beings communicate with each other. So not being technically capable is as good as being illiterate.
I think your ability to quickly adapt to these changing
Yeah.
times will tool you up for the times ahead. And you're currently based out of in Mumbai, right?
Yes.
So are you originally from Mumbai, or
I
like
am.
where were you born? What's your backstory?
I am born and brought up in Mumbai, and I've been in Mumbai my whole life. Although my ancestors are from Kerala, so my grandparents are
Hmm.
from Kerala, and I'm a Malayali basically. And, all my
Okay.
summer
you're
vacations
talking
were in Kerala.
you're talking to another
Oh
Malayali,
yeah,
so
good to know. So I'm from Thrissur, and I love that place. It's a great place
hmm.
to just go and forget all about the city for a while.
So tell me about your parents. So they were like working in Mumbai for a long
Yeah.
time. What's the
So
story?
my dad's a doctor. We
Hmm.
have a hospital in north of Bombay. It's in a place called Nalasopara. So that's beyond Borivali. I don't know. Where are you from? Are you familiar with Bombay?
I know I've visited a couple of times there,
Mhm.
but I'm originally from Bangalore,
Oh,
so
okay. All right.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so we have a hospital there, and I still visit there as a consultant. because of and my mom is a music teacher, so that partly explains the whole
Ah,
music background.
oh, okay, interesting. Okay, okay.
So she teaches Carnatic music. I basically grew up learning about.
So now that answers a burning question I had in my mind. Okay, and are you the only son or you have
I have
siblings?
a younger brother. He's an engineer, and he's much more into music than I am.
Really? Okay.
He's yeah, he's into music creation, and he actually started teaching music in this lockdown, which is
Oh,
which is interesting how the
so
lockdown has just brought out everybody's secret wishes.
totally. Like for me also, the podcast journey started during the lockdown
Ah, I
actually,
see.
and
What do you do
yeah, so
otherwise?
I'm a banker. Like that's my full time job. That's my day job,
Wow.
and this is my passion project. So yeah.
Yeah, I love it. It's like we have the lockdown has just turned everybody into superheroes with a day job and a night job.
Yeah, I think suddenly you realize you're not commuting as much,
Yeah,
and you have that window of time where you could explore some other
yeah,
avenues, and you have a safe space to really experiment things. So
yeah.
it was
It's really incredible how having some time and having some space, what it can do. Yeah,
totally, yeah. I think my mom was telling since last year that this was the first time she's seeing everybody at home. We are eating all three times meal, and we are having those moments with
yeah,
family. So she said, "COVID is really good, and I'm so happy."
yeah,
So we're not discarding or discounting what's happening in the world, but I think there are some good things around this whole season of
yeah,
life for people
yeah.
actually.
Absolutely. And of course, it's very easy to just focus on the negative because that is
Hmm.
what we see all around. But I don't
Yeah,
think
yeah,
there's anything wrong in acknowledging that some things do work out for the best. And of course, we
yeah.
have to take care. And of course, I hope that the pandemic ends very quickly. But it's great to see so many people having not just survived, but actually thrived in this situation. I think it
Right.
speaks a lot for the human capacity to evolve.
And so, coming back to your growing up here, is it because your dad is a doctor that you had a strong influence of pursuing that line of work, or did you have a different inclination and this was like parents' pressure?
So there was no parental pressure as such. I was always interested in science. So the earliest
Hmm.
memory I have of this realization, okay, what I want to do is to be a scientist. And it was
Okay.
years later when I realized that there's actually no such thing as a scientist. If you think about it, nobody's going around saying I'm a scientist. It's always you are somebody who learns one particular science. So you can be a physicist or an astrophysicist
Hmm.
or a geologist. But
Oh.
what is a scientist? I mean, there's no such thing anymore. It's
Hmm.
just a concept that people grow up with. And within science, I had all the options in the world. And
Hmm.
I realized that I liked biology the most. So the choices came about very naturally. I don't remember any particular point where I had to sit back and think of exactly what I want to do because it just seemed very natural. Of
Hmm.
course, I
Hmm.
like science. Of course, I like biology. Of course, I like medicine. And then, of course, I like neurology. So it was a, it was like a one thing led to another kind of story.
So it was a natural transition towards that direction.
Absolutely. The
Okay.
only time when I felt conflicted was when I was 16 and I really wanted to start a musical band.
Ah,
And
okay.
and I remember thinking about, oh, what should I call my band? What what song should I write? And I remember writing lyrics and all that. And then 12th standard happened, and I remember I had to take a call. Should I spend
Hmm.
more time for my band or should I spend more time studying? And
Ah.
thankfully, I grew up and said to myself, "Don't be an idiot." And because it wasn't for
So
me. A lot of people would have done a great job at it, but it wasn't for me.
in the band, what role would you play there? Were you the singer
Yeah,
or were
so I
you
was the
instruments
lyricist
person?
and the singer.
Okay.
If I could, I would have loved to be the second guitarist, like the accompanying guitarist.
Hmm.
I didn't want to be
Right.
the lead guitarist.
Okay.
Yeah,
And so when did you start writing poems and stuff like that?
very
You
young,
had a very
very
young.
young. So
Okay.
I think I was writing poetry when I was 4 or 5 years old. But then,
Hmm.
of course, that kind of poetry is not worth mentioning because you're just, as a 4 year old, you're super excited that rat rhymes with cat.
Correct.
And
Correct.
you can't believe that, nobody's thought of this before and you're the biggest genius in the world.
You'll be surprised to learn that some of us who have zero inclination towards poetry and having any creativity, we think if we can rhyme some things, we're pretty
Yeah.
happy. So,
So yeah,
so
I used to love poetry writing, and I used to love finding patterns between words and figuring out how you can fit in How can you say something in a different way? And then I
mm,
discovered the world of rap songs. I discovered songs in general. And that was just poetry plus, because you add this whole level of music to it. And then I discovered rap, which is poetry at another level, if you really think about it. So nobody plays with words to the extent that rap does. In fact, the only other
absolutely.
genre that really plays with words that much is ghazals.
Really?
It's very interesting how they seem to be at the opposite ends of the spectrum,
Right.
but
Yeah.
ghazals and rap have a lot in common in the way they arrange their structures and the way they flow. So I find that very
Oh,
fascinating.
I thought the volume of words that you need to come up with in a rap is more denser compared to maybe a
There
ghazal.
is, but the basic concept of in a particular rhythm,
Hmm.
you need to fit in so many words, and
Hmm.
in the end, it's not just about rhyming the last one word. A
Hmm.
lot of the best rappers will rhyme the last three or four words. They will go for the sound of it,
Hmm. Hmm.
which
Hmm.
is exactly what ghazals do. I don't know if you're familiar with ghazals, but the last word has to be the same, and the second last words have to.
Okay.
So I
Okay.
found that aspect very interesting. That you can have so many ways of structuring a poem.
Hmm. 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 Hmm.
Yeah,
And when you were writing these, was what language was that? English,
always
or you
English,
had
always English.
always
Yeah,
English?
it's
Okay.
a dream of mine to write in Hindi one day,
Uh-huh.
but so far it remains a dream.
You must have had a strong Hindi influence being in Mumbai. I think
Yeah,
it wouldn't be like it won't be difficult for you though, right?
yeah, I can communicate in Hindi.
Hmm.
That's an interesting thing about poetry, that it's not just about knowing the language. Can you play with the language?
Ah, right,
So
right,
poetry
yeah.
requires a much stronger level of control over language than prose does.
I really have a love for rap songs actually.
Mhm.
So I enjoy if an artist is able to really bring that spirit and is able to churn out words like that. And I do not know all these artists from the rap world, but when I was watching Gully Boy,
Mm,
the very effort the actor put in to perform,
mm.
I really feel that's amazing. If he can actually
Yep,
practice it and do the rendition of the whole thing, it's not an easy act.
not at
So
all. Yeah, not at all.
yeah.
I,
So
that's interesting because the Indian rap scene is really booming right now. It's in the
hmm.
last 5 to 6 years, it's just skyrocketed, and hopefully it will
Yeah.
not stop. Hopefully it will just keep crossing boundaries.
I saw your attempt with Eminem, and you were introducing some medical symptoms that
Yeah, that was just me playing around basically.
that was fun. That was fun. I think you should do, produce such short content and release it out there. People
Yeah,
will pay attention to. I think it's a fun way to learn.
absolutely.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've listed some questions so that I don't miss this chain of thoughts. So what was your first job like? So did you join your dad's hospital or did you pursue something different?
2019, I was pursuing my super specialty.
Okay.
So that was neurology. And then I spent a few months working in a government hospital. It was part of my bond. So doctors have
Oh,
something called
okay.
bond, where after their residency, they have to work for the government for a few
Hmm.
months to a year. So I was
Hmm.
finishing that off. And yes, so for the last 1.5 years, I've been in private practice. So I've been a consultant neurologist.
Okay, so tell me about your that first job. How was it? Was it so we had this idea when by the time we graduate, we go for our first job, something very special. The day one is going to be like exciting, something like that. So what was your day one like?
So my first job was not very new from what I've been doing before,
Hmm.
because it
Hmm.
is just doing the same thing, which is sitting in front of a patient and making them better.
Hmm.
But the
Hmm.
scene was different. The place where I was doing it was different. And for the first
Okay.
time in my life, I was able to charge the patient something, and I would get that money and
Right.
not the hospital, which was the new part, to be honest, because everything else is
Right.
exactly the same.
Hmm.
I've
Hmm.
been treating patients for the last 9 years. Ever since I
Hmm.
got into MD medicine, you do get into that whole role of
Hmm.
treating patients. So your
Hmm.
first job actually feels no different. It's in fact
Hmm.
that's how the system is designed, because you don't want a doctor to feel like they're doing something new.
That's dangerous.
Yes,
Okay.
medicine is the one place where you want the doctor to have done this so many times that they're bored of it.
That's so true. Yeah, I think the doctor, we would prefer a doctor who's bored
Yeah,
because he's seen that enough times rather than somebody who's like, okay, what is this?
correct.
Oh, imagine the differences between professions, right? It's fascinating.
Yeah.
What we think is boring is a very important thing that we would aspire for in a doctor.
Yeah, so boring means that they have seen that thing so many times that it no longer requires their full attention, which is actually a great thing.
I think the mark of a genius or a specialist would be like he can just ask two or three questions and he can really
Yeah.
decipher or conclude what the actual issue is, and that is something that you guys build over a period of time.
Correct. And that's also the reason why super specialization exists, because the
Hmm.
world of medicine has now become so broad
Hmm.
that one person cannot have seen all the cases in all the specialities enough number of
Hmm.
times to be bored of them, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
because now for the last 4.5 years, I've been seeing only neurology patients.
Hmm.
All the cases in neurology are now seeming familiar to me.
Hmm. Hmm.
Whereas
Hmm.
these same cases 7 years ago, when I was doing my MD medicine, would have seemed very new and
Right.
exciting.
Right.
So the whole
Hmm.
purpose is to get over your excitement. हाँ ये तो ठीक है. This is it.
And now there is a pattern which starts emerging, which you notice, अच्छा ये होगा तो मतलब this is must
Exactly.
be the reason, things like that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. Did you have any heroes or role models when you were growing up? Like,
Hmm.
मतलब ऐसे बनना है, I got to become somebody like this guy or this person, something like that you
Oh,
had when you
interesting.
were growing up?
Oh, so couple of it was different in different fields. So
Right.
in the world of poetry, when I was growing up, I really liked for a weird reason Edgar Allan Poe.
Okay, I wouldn't know that, but who's that?
Okay, so he was a very famous
Okay.
author and poet.
Hmm. Hmm.
I liked his work. I liked his poems. I liked the way he would approach really dark topics. He would talk about death. He would talk about loneliness. But he would talk about it from a sense of detachment. And I liked how he used to write, basically.
This was how old were you then?
Oh, I was probably around 14, 15.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And there's a mathematician philosopher called as Bertrand Russell.
Hmm.
I liked him a lot because that was the time when I started thinking about binaries, about how
Hmm.
we always try to define one person by one job. I knew you as a podcaster, and now I
Hmm.
know you as a banker. So now it's great because now I have a dual version of you,
Hmm.
which is how most people are. They are at least two things or more. But we tend to go through life trying to put everybody into one box because it's just easier, right?
Right.
Because
Right.
the more number of variables we have to carry around, the more harder it is to calculate everything.
Hmm.
Uh, but it's also annoying to be boxed in as one thing.
Hmm.
Right? So I liked Bertrand Russell because he was a mathematician, a philosopher, and he tried to combine the two. He would talk a lot about philosophy from the perspective of a scientist. If you
Hmm.
notice earlier on, this was very common. A lot of people were more things. At least the people who have reached the top of their. So a
Hmm.
philosopher could very well be like a painter, for example.
Hmm. 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 Hmm.
So I like that idea. And in the world of medicine, there's a doctor named Oliver Sacks,
Okay.
and he's a neurologist and he's an author. And I really liked him, and I liked his books. I've heard his podcasts, I've heard his interviews. And that is
Hmm.
always somebody that I would look up to. Think that, oh man, one day if I could write like that, talk like that, that'll be pretty sweet.
How you got exposed to these resources? Was it your own self study or somebody else?
My own self study. I think now in the world of the internet and Google and Wikipedia, we
Right.
can be pretty much exposed to whatever we want.
Hmm. Hmm.
So if you're curious about it, you will be exposed to it. It's,
Yeah, I think yeah, if you are really curious and you know how to ask the right
yeah,
questions, I think there are enough resources to direct you to that place,
exactly. And
right?
if you're curious enough and you don't stop searching, you keep on
Hmm.
looking,
Hmm.
you will find a lot
Hmm.
of very amazing things.
Hmm. 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 These initial heroes of yours, they kept changing as you evolved, and I mean, as you grew in your life. And
Yeah,
I think the initial poet and the current poets have changed.
yeah.
And
So poetry, A lot of I've never outgrown them, but I kept discovering new people.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I mean, I discovered Dorothy Parker, I discovered Vikram Seth. Why go anywhere else in India itself? Uh,
Hmm.
Although he's in America now, but then just the way he used to write, I'm a huge fan of his.
Hmm.
And Eminem happened, which is I think a lot of people's first entry into rap, at least from India. And
Right.
then I got into a lot of other art. Yeah, and
Hmm.
then
Hmm.
stand-up comedy happened. So I
Stand-up comedy scene, I think it got a lot of visibility in the recent years compared to
that's right.
maybe 7 8 years ago. I think in the recent
Yeah,
years you see a lot of emerging artists, and the competition is being really intense.
yeah,
So
yeah. And also stand-up comedy is it's I don't know. Society has to reach a particular level before they can appreciate stand-up comedy. I feel
hmm.
because uh, in general, humor is a more evolved
Hmm.
reaction.
Hmm.
Because if you are easily offended, or if you can't see the joke, or if you are not in a position to see the joke, you will not enjoy stand-up comedy.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, which is why I think hierarchy pyramid, stand-up comedy goes pretty high up in the the list.
Were you? Did you attempt stand-up comedy one time? I think I saw a thumbnail view of you in front of a mic somewhere. It had a look of a stand-up though, so I
Yeah,
was
yeah. That
thinking,
was
did you
spoken
even
word poetry. That was just poetry slam somewhere. I used to
Ah,
perform
okay,
poetry
okay,
a lot. I used to. There is a literature festival called Kala Goda. I don't know if you've heard of
okay,
it, but every year it happens in Bombay. So I used to
okay.
perform there, and I used to host literature events in whichever city I'm in. So I would
Yeah.
really enjoy that.
I've seen the earlier versions of you, and you had a very formal look, like ekdam acha ladka, so
Yeah, yeah.
ekdam,
I'm still
like
like that.
very. You are, but then now you're a little more chilled out. There is a very clear look of relaxed.
Yeah.
I'm fine. Yeah, and earlier you had to look proper,
Hmm.
if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Abhi kya has seen, you what? This is me. It's 1 a.m. I'm doing live. It could be anytime. I'm just the way I
Yeah.
am, and I'm producing my stuff. So, what has changed from the person then to now?
That's an interesting observation. Right? I think when you're growing up, because you are not very sure of who you are, whatever
Hmm.
bit you are sure of, you feel like this is very precious and I have to
Hmm.
protect it with all my life.
Right.
Nobody should question me, nobody should judge me. And or I should not put myself up for questioning or judging. In
Hmm.
general, I feel like the older you grow and the more comfortable you become with your identity and who you are, it's not that you don't care, but you are more comfortable with
Hmm.
judgment and all that because you know what it means and what it doesn't mean.
Hmm.
And it's not that if somebody says something, it will make this whole edifice of identity that I've created crumble in 1 second, which could
Right.
happen, to somebody younger. It could have happened to
Right.
me
Right.
10, 15 years ago.
Hmm.
So that's just, I think, part of the natural evolution that everybody goes through. And it's
Yeah.
never completely done. You are always evolving.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think compared to the earlier times, now maybe if a youngster is starting up something in the online space, or there are so many platforms, the number of eyeballs to you is like tenfolds compared to what it was maybe 10 years
Yeah.
ago. So the degree of judgment or the harshness that one can experience is quite high, I
Yep.
feel. Like if somebody even writes a nasty comment on your
Yeah.
feed, then you will forget all the positivity. The pura everything is consumed in that negativity. Why this guy told me, or
Yeah.
remarked this way, right?
Yeah. I've actually given this a lot of thought about trolling and thought about it from both sides. Why do people troll and why does trolling affect you so much?
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
truth is that it affects everyone. Nobody is
Right, right. Immune to
immune
that.
to that. And the reason is that it comes from a very primitive space in the brain. Because
Hmm.
for the brain, social validation is hugely important because your tribe approving you is the one thing that keeps you from getting kicked out
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
being thrown into the wild, having to survive for yourself. You'll probably die in the hunter gatherer times. If your tribe kicks you
Right.
out, you'll die. And so your brain gives a lot of importance to being accepted by the community.
Hmm.
And so if one person also starts saying something bad about you, it's a big alarm signal that goes on in your brain. Because
Hmm.
what
Okay.
if this starts a fire? What if this
Right.
starts spreading? What if this one person recruits 10 more people? and all of them start chanting together, kick him out or lock her up or whatever.
Right,
This
right,
is
right.
that's the primitive part of your brain going into overdrive.
In play.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and which is why you realize that you could get 100 compliments, and you wouldn't care about that as much as you would care about that one insult. Because those
Right,
100 compliments may not save your life, but that one insult has a potential of ruining you.
Hmm.
Right? So you have to remind yourself that hey, you're not in the jungle anymore. Nobody's kicking you out of any tribe, and yeah, just still calm down.
It's a brain which is kicking in to take you into a protective zone of
Yeah,
sorts so that you are not an outcast from the tribe of sorts.
correct.
And this knowledge is really helpful. So when you say that with this distinction that this is the biology in action in a sense,
Mm.
then you probably can distance yourself and see it. But you think there are individuals in the world today, who are very independent of what the world thinks of them.
Yeah.
They're very independent thinkers. They stand by strong convictions ki, bhai, this is who I am
Yeah.
and this is my
Yeah.
opinion, right? How are they still operating in the world if this biology is still in play?
So, whatever we say about biology, we are always talking about it in terms of a Gaussian curve. So, a Gaussian curve is when you have a curve that starts off low and it reaches a peak and then it comes down. So,
Hmm.
majority of the people will fall under that bell curve of what we
Hmm.
consider as normal,
Hmm.
right? And we consider it as normal because majority of the people fall under it. So it's like a
Right, right.
self-fulfilling prophecy. And there will be people in the who are outside of the 97th percentile on both
Hmm.
sides
Hmm.
in anything. We can take
Hmm.
height. So, for example, if I say a 25-year-old man, what should his height be? And if I say,
Hmm.
okay, the average height at this age will be 5'10", for example, if I just say that, then that means that the 5'10" line will have the maximum number of people. And there'll be lesser
Right.
people at 5'8" and 5'12", lesser number of people at 5'6" and 6'2". And there will be
Hmm.
some people who are less than 4 feet. There'll be some people who are more than 7 feet. But they will be in
Hmm.
the edges of just like us. So when I talk about how social validation is important, people don't like it when other people insult. There will always be some people who will not care at all,
Hmm.
who are
Hmm.
in the extreme. And there'll be some people who care so much that is all that they think about.
Hmm. Hmm.
But majority of the people will have that sort of like how we are feeling.
And that is something which can be changed over a period of time. We could move from the average to the extremes also over a period of our life.
Absolutely. So that Gaussian curve is not fixed. And so
Hmm.
the story of evolution is the story of how the Gaussian curve is shifting in one direction. So what is
Okay, okay, okay.
extreme at one point will become normal after a few
Normal.
years.
Okay. And it becomes a new normal and then it creates a new set of extremes.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, okay, okay.
So we think
Okay.
of human beings as this as a single organism, but it's not. So we are spread out across emotions, across intelligence, across capacity to learn. Everybody will lie somewhere on that spectrum.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so for evolution to have, that's why evolution is so slow, because we have to
Hmm.
drag 7 billion people in one direction. And some people will be very fast and some people will be dragging behind. So that's just how it is.
Uh, do you subscribe to that thinking that if a critical mass of any tribe does a certain behavior or activity, it automatically transitions to the entire species?
So what is expected?
Hmm.
So our behavior is basically directed by a couple of things. It is directed first and foremost by your own survival instincts,
Hmm.
right? So if there is a fire and if there are 10 people in the room, and if 9 people don't run away, the chances are still high that you will run away, right?
That is a little mixed, right? Maybe chances are that I may stay back also. I'm seeing everybody staying put.
Yeah,
I say, yaar, main kyun bhagum? It seems like this is the right choice to make because validation, social proof,
yeah,
right?
but that's the thing. That's what I'm saying. That when you're
Hmm.
talking of absolute self-preservation,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
you tend to not really look at other people.
Okay, okay. It comes to only my survival
Correct.
of sorts, right? Hmm.
But you take it one step forward and you find everybody running away, which is in
Hmm.
keeping with your own response. but everybody running away to one exit. So suppose if you're in a room and there are
Hmm.
three exits and
Hmm.
everybody runs to one exit, the chances are that you will also go to that exit. Although logic
Right.
says that you should probably head to one of the others because those are empty,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
because everybody is running towards one, here
Right.
you will run towards the same one.
Understood.
Right? So
Okay.
that
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
how mob mentality works. That is what group
Hmm.
thinking is. And
Hmm.
so there'll
Hmm.
be a stampede and people will be running over each other, all that. So at that time, you don't have your logical sense of, okay, let me look around, let me see what is the right thing to do. No, none of that. So if you're caught
Hmm.
up in that frenzy, you will just do what everybody's doing. And that is second. Third is what society expects you. So
Hmm.
social expectation is a huge driver for action.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Hmm.
a person who will be spitting on the road in India, you take them to Europe.
Yeah. He'll be the most cultured and well
Absolutely,
behaved.
because you have that environment, right?
Right.
And
Right. Right.
even if you might spit once, in a year's time, you will be unrecognizable because social
Hmm. Hmm.
expectation plays a big role.
Hmm.
But that's why. So if from tomorrow onwards, all of us suddenly decide that anybody who throws out a bottle from a
Hmm.
railway train has to be stared at in shock. How could you do that? What did you do? How could you
Right.
throw a plastic thing on the road? In 1 week, that will stop.
Because we're creating that much pain to that experience
Yeah,
of somebody doing that, right?
correct.
For him, right?
So
That's
in that
fascinating.
way,
Hmm.
yes.
Hmm.
So the critical mass
Hmm.
theory does work.
So, which means if somebody were to make a behavioral change or a transformation in themselves, if they optimize their environments, change happens more
Yes.
easily compared to they working on their will
Oh
and
yeah,
trying to make things
100%.
right.
So
Hmm.
one of the best ways of making change is to identify the trigger points, the things that will
Hmm.
take you towards that change, and the things that will take you away from that.
Could you give an example? What do you mean by trigger
Like
points?
for
Hmm.
example, you want to eat healthy and work out.
Hmm.
So the things that make you, the things that will take you towards eating healthy
Hmm.
and working out would be, say, having only those foodstuffs in the house that you want to eat, having your
Hmm.
schedule written up nicely and taped on the wall,
Hmm.
maybe having photographs of people that you really admire who are super healthy and the ones that who inspire you, put
Hmm.
them on
Hmm.
your wall so that
Hmm.
you have those constant triggers that push you towards the direction and
Hmm.
removing the triggers that take you away from it. So maybe not have chocolates in the house, not have biscuits in the
Hmm.
house,
Complete
eliminating it
life. So
completely
yeah.
and making it easier for yourself. So if you say, if you want to go for a run in the morning, instead of
Hmm.
saying that I'll get up and run whenever I wake up, instead
Hmm.
have an alarm that you've set for the specific purpose of running
Hmm.
and have your shoes and your running socks and everything set up very easily.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
there
Hmm.
is minimal resistance for you to step out of that door.
So we're minimizing the friction points
Yeah,
between that act and
correct,
the drive to do it.
correct.
Right.
And the
Right.
friction is highest at the start. If it
Hmm.
happens like 7 to 8 times, it just gets easier and easier. And after a month, it will
Hmm.
become harder to stop.
Hmm. 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 Makes sense.
I say all these things, and I wish I could follow half.
Isn't that amazing that all of us have so many points of
Oh
advice?
yeah,
अगर कोई आके हमसे पूछे कि यार क्या करना है लाइफ में, I think I'll have some so many interesting points to give it to the guy.
yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I think this all of us are guilty because
There's an interesting
uh,
reason for this actually, because
okay, yeah,
there
let's
is
hear
actually
that.
two parts of our brain. One is the cortical part, which is the calm, reasoning, thinking part. And
Hmm.
the other is the primitive brain, which has the limbic system, the self survival, the anger, the fear, the emotional
Hmm.
aspects.
Hmm.
When I'm giving you advice, okay, so if you suppose you lost your job or you're in a relationship where you're not sure what to do and you're
Hmm.
asking me about it, I am thinking about your problem with 100% of my cortical brain. I
Okay.
have no skin in the game. So my
Right. Right.
primitive brain
Right.
doesn't kick in at all. So
Hmm.
I'll end up giving you really good advice because it's very logical and calm. Cool.
Hmm.
If it happens to me,
Hmm.
my primitive brain is in overdrive and it
Right.
completely comes in the way of my cortical reason. So it's actually not a
Yeah.
bad idea to have somebody to give you advice.
Hmm. And I think yes, some kind of accountability with somebody you respect
Yeah.
or you look up to, and also if we build habits around something, then it probably could become automatic. Maybe we don't have to really apply our brains
Yeah.
and out.
Correct. So habits are basically you outsourcing decision making.
Hmm.
So that
Nicely put. Yeah, I like that.
so you don't have to think. I mean, supposing if chewing was not a habit, every
Hmm.
morsel you'll have to think, okay, food is in my mouth. Now what do I do? Okay, let me move my
Hmm.
jaw. How annoying would that be?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
we would have had more leaner people in the world then because they wouldn't want to eat.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why people love eating because you don't have to think about it. So
Right.
similarly, if you want to enjoy going to the gym, you have to get to a stage where you don't have to think about it. Like ये तो
Hmm.
होना ही है, मतलब,
Right.
there's no choice.
Right. Hmm.
So then you'll start enjoying it.
Do you agree with that concept of this 21 day of doing something makes it a habit? I don't know. I don't think that works actually. So do you think?
21 days is arbitrary. It's not that you do it for 20 days and you stop and it's all shit. Or if you do it for 22nd days, you'll never stop it. ऐसा नहीं है. But as a concept, the more number of times you do it, the more those neurons will connect. And your habits are basically just neurons connecting in a way that they haven't connected before. And so when you do it for 42 days, it'll be even stronger. If you do it for 84 days, it'll be even stronger.
You're establishing these new neural pathways with every action. Okay. 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 Hmm.
The saying is that neurons that fire together wire together. So you have to make those two neurons fire together. So the one neuron that say makes you brush your teeth, and the second neuron that will say make you put on your shoes to go running. If you make them fire together, but say 21 days, you brush and you put on your shoes. Brush, put on your shoes. Brush, put on your shoes. 1 month later, yeah, the the lag between brushing and putting on your shoes will not be much.
Yeah. So
It'll seem
it kind of
automatic.
becomes a associated behavior. Like
Exactly.
iske baad im turant the next one.
Which is what a habit is.
So once a neuro pathway is established, and let's say you discontinue that act, the strength of
Mhm.
that depletes or it stays
Yeah.
whatever was built.
No, it does deplete.
Okay.
It,
Okay.
it,
Okay.
it may not go down to zero. So you will always be better off than when you started from scratch, but it does
But
deplete.
skills, cycling or
Yeah.
swimming, which we may not be doing on a daily basis, but still, if
Mhm.
you were given a cycle, you know how to really go and pedal. But
Yeah,
so how is that staying for permanent? That is a skill that you have acquired forever.
correct. So those are procedural skills. And how to do something is a procedural skill which you can pick up. You may not have the same level of proficiency, right? So, for example, if as a child you learn to cycle so well that you could balance yourself on one wheel for 5 minutes, which means that you are basically a professional cyclist now or a cycle artist. And then you don't cycle for the next 40 years. At the age of 50, when you pick up a cycle, you may not be able to do that.
Okay, you're right.
Yeah.
Correct.
But you'll
Correct.
still be able to cycle because certain skills you can still maintain. But even then, when you start cycling, you will wobble for a minute
Because you're touching this whole machine after such a long gap, the
after
body
a
is
long time.
adapting to that old
Correct.
pattern. Yeah, yeah. That's an interesting observation. Yeah, I think many of us when we like it's maybe when you try your musical instrument after a long gap, maybe it
Yeah.
takes a while to warm up for that. I think
Yeah. But it's never as good as zero. So if you've learned it once, it's always going to be there. So
the baseline changes from where you're starting off. So
exactly. So learn it and keep whatever it is. Just learn it and keep. Put in that whatever 2 3 months of really intense work. Learn it, and then at least it's in the bank. The next time you pick it up, maybe you need to spend 2 days.
you will be faster to reach at least a decent level compared to somebody who's
Exactly.
starting from zero. I want to ask an interesting question related to the difference between a man's brain and a woman's brain. Is there
Hmm.
a difference biologically or the way they have been designed? It triggers very different thinking process for both of us. Is that true? Or
So, to a very large extent, no.
oh no, okay.
No, it's hyped out of proportion. For to all, so the thing is that we love to spot patterns, and we love to say that, oh, this is. because this is a man or this is a woman. And we tend to attribute a lot of things. But a lot of masculine behaviors or feminine behaviors are actually done by all genders. And it's just that we have that pattern recognition in place. So the recent joke, right, of how people used to say that men are too emotional, women are too emotional to be in politics. And we have seen in the last 1 year the whole how a lot of men in power have done so many things out of emotional breakdown and being angry, and it's just it's ridiculous. But that being said, there are definitely neurochemical and biological differences between men and women. That cannot be swept away, and that it does play a role in certain things like level of empathy and their ability to understand or the ability to communicate. Of course, the physical aspects are a whole other discussion, you know, muscle mass and bone density and all of that. But the important thing though is that all these biological things are not more important than the training that you get while you are alive. So there are things that you're born with, sure, your genetics, right? The chromosomes in your body, that you can't change. But that one thing does not decide your whole life immediately. Because if that were true, then what's the point of life if everything is decided? So the beauty of human beings is that your life experiences actually decide a lot of things. Right? So it's not that men can't in making decisions or all those things that you say about men and women. All of that is circumstantial. That's what I'm trying to say.
So it's a large generalization of sorts. Maybe that
Oh yeah,
people
yeah,
are okay. Okay.
absolutely.
Coming to brain health, what must one do to really optimize their brain? Like,
Hmm.
I think that's a very wide.
I know. I mean, I'm just thinking, wow,
Yeah.
okay.
So if I were to
It is-
ask in this day and age, matlab, what can a guy do or a girl do to really keep their brain functioning optimally? What are the few good practices that you would recommend?
so the main thing to understand about the brain is that it doesn't like dealing with a lot of threats. So it will go to any lengths to avoid being threatened, which is great, except that it's also super sensitive. So it keeps spotting threats everywhere. Now you put these two things together and you are in for a tough ride because it's basically saying that I'll go into a house of horrors and I'm terrified of ghosts. It's
No.
not a good combination. And
Right. Okay.
the brain is so good at spotting potential threat, and it's also so good at overreacting to them. So to really optimize, when you talk about optimizing your brain, I think the way to think about it is optimizing your threat perception. Like figure out what is really a threat and what is really not. And then the only way to do this is to be very mindful. Because if you keep getting threatened by every random conversation or every whatever, yeah, like then your brain is on this roller coaster of alarm signals. It is constantly setting off fire alarms. And then that's what leads to chronic anxiety and panic attacks, all of that. But that's not a good situation to be in because if you, every time the brain sets off the alarm, it is basically calling in the firemen. And that increases your body temperature in a way that it increases your inflammation, it increases your stress levels. That can, if it goes on long enough, it increases the chance of you getting depression or all of that stuff. And it all starts with threat.
Would you say that we are exposing today so much to, let's say, news, and news is filled with threats? So why the world is really suffering, why things are really bad, and I think there is a lot of sensationalism in news or in these medias, and people who are actually sitting in the house subjecting themselves to this kind of news constantly, they are actually inducing anxiousness just like by default, right?
They are. And the sad thing is that news is a commodity like anything else. And the reason that they are selling sad news or sensational news is because of a simple reason. Like I said, the brain is very good at spotting threats. And so every time it spots a threat, it will give it its full attention.
So it feeds on it almost.
Yeah, and your attention is exactly what a TV channel would want. So if it only shows you happy news, your attention will soon wander away. So by definition, if somebody wants your attention, they will keep you terrified.
So it's by design.
It's by design, right? So I mean, and it makes logical sense that you want to know what all is going wrong. And so if somebody wants to show you only the things that are going wrong in the world, there are enough and more things that are going wrong.
Absolutely.
There will
You would only
always
look
be,
for it. Yeah, yeah.
correct. There will always be things that are going wrong in the world.
Right.
Because why will you look at things that are going right in the world? What do I care? It's fine. Right? It's a tricky thing because on the one hand, you do want to be informed. But unfortunately, we are not trained to deal with the kind of threat levels that we are constantly being faced with. So if I were to talk about brain optimization, I would first talk about brain hygiene. So
Brain hygiene, nice, nice. Okay.
Learn to deal with all the junk that is going into your brain.
That's a really good point. So first identify what to eliminate before even thinking about what to consume.
Yeah, exactly. And figure out how much importance should you give because you cannot solve the world's problems, even though they are presented to you as if you should solve the world's problems, but you can't. Right? So you have to be very good at identifying what are you there for, what is your task, and why are you listening to this? How can this affect you, and what can you do to change this?
Yeah, does it serve you actually? That's a question we need to ask ourselves. How important is it to constantly learn and challenge our minds as we get older? Do you think that's an important thing to do deliberately, or should we just let it be and deal with life as it goes?
So this is very subjective. I'm not here to prescribe like one way to live.
Right.
I think there are 7 billion people and there are 7 ways to live, basically 7 billion. My personal belief is that curiosity is something that children have, and it makes life really beautiful because they are always interested in the possibilities of things. What can this become? So, like a cupboard could be the entrance to Narnia. It's just imagination, curiosity, all of that. That thing reduces imagination.
Why is that?
Mainly because of, again, threat levels. We start sensing a lot of problems and we just want to solve them. As children, we are not really threatened much. We have people to look after us and our brains are more receptive to new information. The older we grow, the harder we find it to take in new information because the previous information can sometimes come in the way of the new information, which is called as bias.
Okay.
And so our neurons will stop making space for new information, which is called as neuroplasticity. When your neurons make space for new information, when they connect in a different way just so that they can accommodate the new events in your life. That is neuroplasticity.
So, Siddharth, just to ask a follow-up question on that. So there is a brain is changing actually when there is neuroplasticity, when there is happening. Okay.
Physically, as in not the outer structure, but
internally there are things
the
happening.
wiring is changing. Yeah.
Okay.
So your brain is basically billions of neurons connected in a particular way. And if that connection changes, the new change.
But every time there are like hundreds and thousands of brain cells dying also on a daily basis. And they're also producing, right?
Yeah, no. So brain cells dying it's not a very practical thing to talk about because there's nothing to be gained from it. That is just the normal way of any body organ functioning. It's not that we can do anything about that.
Yeah. True. Yeah.
Right? Except maybe sleep better. Because it just increases your overall brain health if you sleep better.
It's like the hygiene of it's just kind of cleaning it up and...
Exactly.
Okay.
There's something called as the glymphatic system, which is, there's still a lot of research going on, but sleep is supposed to be when all the trash gets taken.
But the information in the cells are passed on to the other cells and it continues. So there's no loss of a memory or anything because of the...
So this is a very complex topic.
Okay.
This is very, very complex because the way that memory is stored and all that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we'll even get into this.
Okay,
this
cool.
Is very, very
okay,
complex.
That's a different topic altogether. Okay,
yeah,
another
absolutely.
discussion. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So, wait, what were we talking about?
So we were talking about the importance of learning as we age, and do you subscribe to that life?
I
So you
do.
said, yeah,
So
yeah.
I personally do. I feel that it helps to keep your neuroplasticity alive. It helps to be curious. It helps to constantly be on the lookout for new things you can do because it keeps you fluid. And so it helps you adapt to new things much better. So if there is a certain unexpected thing like a pandemic, and you are set in your ways, you are used to doing these particular set of things every day. Now what do you do?
Yeah, because you're too rigid, you won't be able
Yeah.
to change.
Okay. So many people who are above 50s, 60s, now when they come to the hospital and they have a lot of varied symptoms, it could be anything. A lot of them say that my problem started after the lockdown started. Before that, I was fine. I used to go down for a walk. I used to meet my friends. We used to play cards. We used to hang out. All that stopped. In 1 month, I'm sick. Their whole body starts to suffer.
So that speaks about how rigid they are internally about this. Okay,
Yeah,
change.
yeah.
Okay, I have few more questions and then I'm gonna wind up. What habits do you wish that you had started earlier in your life?
Well, I wish I had started documenting stuff early
Hmm.
on.
When you say documenting, like in written, or you're talking about
Yeah,
we? Okay.
it doesn't matter actually.
Hmm.
The mode of communication or the mode of documentation doesn't matter as much as actually doing it. So nowadays it's much easier to document because your Twitter feed is your documentation,
Hmm.
Instagram is your documentation. It doesn't matter how you're documenting your ideas,
Hmm.
but document your ideas.
Hmm.
Because ideas are a result of you being in that place at that time in that mood.
Because you will not get that thought again, maybe.
Yeah, not in
Okay.
that way.
Right.
So ideas are the most precious resource in the world because it can quite possibly never ever happen again in history.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
there's somebody like you being in that particular place in that situation. Of course, considering that a lot of human beings behave similarly, a similar idea can come about, which is why they say that all love poems have already been written in the 16th century itself, because there's only a finite number of ways in which you can experience love.
Hmm.
But still, there
Right.
is always a subtle difference.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
You know, and
Because,
considering how every human being on earth, for the large extent, have like two eyes, one nose, one mouth, 2 ears, and we still look so different. It's the subtle things that actually makes you you.
hmm.
So
Hmm. So
document your
so
ideas.
so you wish that you would have started that earlier. Okay. Do you think when we think of documenting, we conduct our life very differently compared to if it was undocumented?
We do, yeah,
We do, right?
yeah. Because if you have to document things, you will give it more importance. You will pay attention to the details, and you will look for peripheries. You look for peripheral things. I have this idea, then what else can I connect to it? So that will actually allow you to extract more from that situation than you would have if you would have just said, "Oh, okay, that's pretty cool," and then moved on. You would have not picked up on it.
Siddharth, what is your decision making process when you have to make a decision? That, and we are in a times when we have too many options these days. It's not
Mhm.
like we do not have options. We have too many options, and when we have to make a decision for every option available, there are so many outcomes and possibility, right? So, what is your decision making process? How do you arrive at a decision?
Like you said, I think because we have unlimited options now, basically, it means you can do anything, which is a terrible thing because chances are that you'll end up doing nothing. So I have sort of reached a situation where I don't think of the decision as much as I think of who am I.
Okay, interesting. Can you elaborate on that?
And yeah, so if I have to decide something, the decision that I have to take is, am I the sort of person to do this? So then you tap into your predefined set of characters.
You're approaching more from the value system of you as a person
Yeah,
than okay, okay.
yeah. So
Hmm.
then it becomes a little easier
Hmm.
because you would want to do everything. The truth is that nobody wants to miss out on anything.
Oh, that fear of missing out is always there. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And that's normal. That's fine. So now how do you decide? Because you have limited time, you have limited energy. Right? So you have to decide something. And deciding something is the important bit. Right? what you decide is actually not as important. So I just try to go with, is this something that I would do? And that also helps you constantly revisit your own identity. That who are you?
Absolutely, yeah. So and that is also evolving. So the Siddharth who would have asked 2 years ago, "Who am I?" is a very different Siddharth compared to today.
Correct. So now, if I say, okay, I want to go skydiving, and 2 years ago, I would ask myself, oh, Siddharth, go skydiving? Probably not. If I say, yeah, probably yes, then that means, oh, I've evolved, I've changed. So from that perspective, it does sound, it can seem like a self-obsession, but then I feel that your identity is decided one way or the other. So either you decide your identity or it gets decided for you by accident without you knowing. So you might as well have a say in what kind of person you are.
I know that you love reading books. I wanted to ask you, what are some of the books that have shaped your perspective about life? Any
Mm,
2 or 3 books that stands out?
yeah. The simplest ones to recommend are Sapiens
Hmm.
by Yuval Harari. Very
Yes.
interesting book. Talks about evolution. Talks a little bit about neuroscience as well. Talks about
Hmm.
human behavior. Books like has
Okay.
been a very interesting book. I've read it a couple of times. And trying to most recently, I did this whole series where I tried to interpret the Bhagavad Gita from an absolute neuroscientific perspective.
Okay.
So no religion involved. Just let's see how much science we can draw out of this. And it was a very interesting experience because
Hmm. Hmm.
almost 70% of the verses made sense if you throw out all religious aspects and you
Hmm.
just look at it from an evolutionary perspective.
Hmm. Hmm.
Almost 70-80% of the verses made sense to me. So
Hmm.
I'm sure if somebody more knowledgeable than me can make much more sense of it. And another book that really inspired me was an unorthodox one. It's called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Okay. What is
It's,
it about?
it's like a humorous book on a man
It's a
who,
fiction?
it's a fictional book
Okay.
about a
Okay.
man who travels through space
Okay.
and travels across the universe because the Earth is destroyed
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
of a misunderstanding.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And
Why you found
how
it fascinating? Like, what aspect of the book makes it interesting for
so the
you?
book is interesting because it starts off as a humorous book. So in your first reading, it's just like, haha, how funny, how interesting. And in your fourth reading, you realize that this book is addressing some of the most existential and philosophical questions of our lives. Uh, it talks about language, it talks about the purpose of human life, it talks about what is God, it talks about communication important. It's an insane book. And to talk about all those things from a humorous perspective is, yeah, has been very interesting to me.
I remember, I think in one of the conversations, I don't recollect with whom you were doing a YouTube live, where you mentioned it was important for you to finish Bhagavad Gita. I think
Hmm.
it was during the lockdown that you wanted to do this. Why
Yeah.
was it so important for you to complete that book?
Oh, just as a whim.
Hmm.
Most of the things I do it because I get a whim. Uh,
Okay.
it's just
like
that
like a kick out of it. Let me just do it, like something like that.
yeah, because I asked myself, like, okay, so is that the kind of person who would finish this?
Uh,
And if it's yes, then I better do it then, because what else can I do?
okay. Are there any interesting documentaries or videos or movies that you really enjoyed? Anything that comes to mind?
So I do watch. I have seen some documentaries, but
Hmm.
nothing that I really want to recommend because in general, all documentaries are just giving you knowledge and they're giving it in as exciting a way as they can.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So I can't.
Anything specifically which you remember or you enjoyed watching? Anything that
Mm,
maybe I'm catching you suddenly, maybe you can't recollect.
no,
Had
no.
I?
The one movie that I think I would recommend everyone watch is a film called as The Man from Earth.
Okay.
So it was on YouTube for a long time. I'm not sure if it's there yet, but
Hmm.
I would definitely recommend everyone check it out.
Hmm.
It's called The Man from Earth, and it talks about it's a fictional story about evolution.
Okay.
Let's put it that way, without giving any spoilers.
You're very fascinated with evolution, right? I think you really like
Oh
to
yeah, yeah, of
uh,
course.
see the history and study how we evolved and all that.
Yeah, yeah. Everything
Hmm.
that we are doing is because of that. Every single thing, every act that you do from morning till night is a result of 1 billion years of evolution. You can't really escape it.
You're killing the idea of originality. I feel everything is like already like it's all predictable.
No, no, no.
Uh,
I'm saying it's a result of
hmm.
evolution. So every original thought you have
Hmm.
is a result of evolution.
Okay, so it took all these years for me to arrive at
Yes,
this point to give.
exactly.
Okay, okay.
Which actually makes it, which actually makes every moment so precious and important.
Okay, okay.
Because all the effort that has gone into making this happen.
You're putting a huge weight on our existence. Don't take it lightly, right?
Exactly. You better not.
Okay. How does Siddharth define success? What's your definition of success?
This is very, very, very subjective.
Yeah. So it's your success. So like when you say success, what's your definition?
Yeah. So the problem is that success itself is very subjective, even in one's own life, because it's like happiness. You feel it when you get there, and then as soon as you get there, it's just the way that we are wired, because we are not wired to be very happy in one place. Uh, so you might feel content. Don't get me wrong. So contentment, satisfaction, all that could be there. But happiness or the feeling of, oh, I'm so successful, requires a constant input, like a constant reminder that you are successful. You are. So I think it's just about, it's in the idea of, are you learning? Are you a better version of yourself than you were yesterday, if possible, or 1 year ago, or 10 years ago, whatever parameter you want to keep it? But are you a better version of yourself? And then if you are, then that's pretty successful, right? Because every other parameter of success is pretty relative. Because if I say, uh, I want to come first in a race and I'm successful, that is meaningless if who you're competing with is, if you are 20 and you're competing with 5 year olds,
Right.
it doesn't matter.
Right.
The only parameter, and suppose you come in third, what are you going to take away from it? The only parameter of comparison that is valid is, are you faster than you were in the last race?
So that's your own growth that we're talking about.
Correct. Everything else is absolutely abstract,
Mm-hmm.
because you change the environment and your success becomes a failure. So what kind of success is that, right? So this is a problem that a lot of people face when they go from one school to another, for example. Like if they go from like a small town school to a big corporate school, and they suddenly find out that, oh, I used to be considered smart before, and now I'm suddenly the dumbest person in class, and
Right.
now am I successful anymore? It's a very definition of success.
Mm-hmm.
The question remains: are you better than you were?
And so when you see that way, you feel you are successful?
Yeah, in the sense that I feel like I know a lot more than I did last week. Um, like for example, last week I didn't know how to properly edit a YouTube video, and this week I started learning this software called as DaVinci Resolve, and I figured out how to make a transition in a video. I figured out how to crop a video. I figured out how lighting should work when you are shooting a YouTube video, which is something I never knew in 2017 or 18 or 19.
Right. Yeah.
Because I never needed to. But now I need to. So I'm learning that.
Okay.
Yeah. And this is not going to be success for anybody else, because why should anybody else care?
Right.
So that way, I think success is something very, very simple.
What do you believe that other people think is crazy?
I think happiness is a scam.
Okay. I think you're calling for another discussion altogether. But seriously, you think it's a scam?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, is it one of those things you're saying for the sake of saying, or you really believe that?
No, I really believe that. What is a scam? What
Like,
is a scam according to you?
Something which is not true.
Yeah, so that's happening in the sense that when you say something is not true, it means that what I feel is true, other people may not feel it. And if something is true now and it's not true 2 minutes later, then is that true? So that's what happiness is. It's, you get a phone and you're happy, and then on the way back you stub your toe on a bed and you're unhappy. What's the point of that? I also get it, because neuroscientifically it is just basically some chemicals hitting this part of the brain called as nucleus accumbens. It's really fine. The idea of expending a lot of energy and effort on just feeling happy is, I feel like that's an endless loop that you won't really get out of. Mm, the idea should not be, and the funny thing is that as long as you're chasing happiness, you're not going to get it. As long as you start chasing anything else, happiness just comes as a byproduct, because that's what happiness is. Happiness is a byproduct. It's just never the thing. And so it should never be the main goal of anything.
I like that. That's a very
Yeah.
interesting belief you hold, and not belief. I think it's an observation, right? I think,
Yeah.
yeah. So happiness is not something which you can hold it for long. It's not going to be lasting. So
It's not, by
yeah.
definition. When were you ever always happy? It's just, it's not your fault. It's
Yeah.
nobody's fault. It's just the way the brain is designed. Your
Right.
brain is not designed to be happy all the time, and that's fine.
So you
The
have this moment
expectation
of
of
peakness. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. So the expectation of being happy, that is the actual scam.
So we've been sold this idea that if you do this, you will be happy, and
Yeah.
that
So
is
that's
that.
an advertising scheme. That's not true. It never was.
So there is not X amount of money or X amount
No,
of girls, or there is no X amount of something which will make me happy.
nothing. It's not possible.
Uh,
So
okay.
good luck with that.
All right. What is something very few people are talking about now, but everyone will be talking about it 1 year from now?
I think virtual reality, probably,
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
and in the probably virtual reality in the education space,
Hmm.
I feel.
Okay. Can you tell more about it? What do you mean by virtual reality in the education space? So what's
Just the way we perceive reality. So it could be either also virtual or augmented, but using variables to change our worldview in a very literal sense, the way we view the world around us, and its implications on everything from gaming to navigation to communication to teaching to cooking to, yeah, everything. Yeah, I think a year is a good time. Yes. A year, maybe 2 years.
okay? That's a very interesting point. I think, yeah, the rate at which technology is changing and people are adopting it, I think this could happen maybe in a year's time.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
It's high time technology found a new way of interacting, because mobiles have been around for a long time. The next big thing is this.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. My last question. What do you want people to remember about Siddharth once Siddharth has left this planet?
Oh man. So yeah, that's the concept of legacy, right?
Right. Which one can believe or subscribe or not, it's fine. Like sometimes I feel there was a point of having any legacy that we are absolutely irrelevant in the whole scheme of evolution. What are we talking about legacy? I feel sometimes,
Yeah. No,
but
I don't think
that's
that.
one way. But yeah,
Yeah, I don't think that we are irrelevant. I think we are as relevant as anything else is. If you say that you are irrelevant, you're saying everything is irrelevant, because
right. Yeah, yeah.
nothing
I
is
feel
more
that
relevant than
sometimes.
you. Yeah. So I think that we all have our role to play in this whole cosmic conversation,
Hmm.
whatever it is.
Hmm.
So you will do things that you feel like, you will say things you feel like. Maybe you'll have an impact and maybe you won't. Either way, the the good thing is that you're not going to do any harm,
Hmm.
because it's not possible. The system is too big. You're not going to screw it up. So
Right.
don't
Right.
worry about that. The worst you could be is, like, at worst you will be meaningless,
Hmm.
and also not meaningless. That's not the right.
Insignificant, maybe.
Insignificant, or yeah, mostly harmless. You'll be harmless. So any impact you can have at all will be positive.
Okay, cool. Okay, so we go with
Yeah.
that. So let's hear your version of what do you want the world to remember you for?
I would really love it if I can accelerate the change of our thinking towards a more neuroscientifically oriented. Because I can't believe it's still 2021, and we are so caught up with discussing things that are coming from a primitive brain and talking about it. We have no idea why this is happening. Like, oh my God, why am I so angry? Oh my God, why did I have a panic attack? We should know why we have a panic attack. This information is out there. It's not some top secret anymore. We have a very clear idea on why it happens. We have a good idea why anxiety happens. Why don't we know about it? So I would really love it if I could help out even 1% in getting that knowledge out into the world. Because it just takes away the stress. of not knowing is an underrated weapon.
Ah, that's a nice line. You should tweet it. Sid, it's been absolute fun having this conversation. I really
Yep,
liked
likewise.
the different areas we touched upon, and you definitely have a mind to explore curiosities of various topics. Really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you enjoyed too.
As did I. I hope to get a copy of this whole recording if you can send it across just for me to listen to it. And I'm
Yes,
looking forward to listen to the podcast whenever it does come.
absolutely. And where can people find you? What are the coordinates?
So they can search for me on Instagram and on Twitter. I'm on both of these platforms as Sid_Warrior. That's WARIER. And my website is sidwarrior.com.
Awesome. And is there any final message for the audience? Anything, any ask or anything that you want to share?
Well, just a quick reminder to everybody that neuroscience is beautiful, and a lot of things that you might be going through and being troubled by is actually just your brain trying to find out a better way for you to live out.
Hmm.
So don't be too harsh on your brain. Be kind to it. It's trying its best. And you have a prefrontal cortex. Use it as much as you can.
Awesome. All right, Sid. I think on that note, let's call it a day. Thank you for your time. And that was another episode. I'm glad you're listening to the episode and the podcast. If you're really enjoying this, do give it a review, do give it a rating. I'd really love that. And if you want to look into the show notes, please go to my website, RareErth.com, where I have actually put all the description and all the links to the show notes of every episode. So do check it out. Thank you.